Today, we are talking to Lisa Pahl, who is a hospice and emergency medicine social worker. She's also the co creator of an incredibly innovative and forward thinking game called The Death Deck. Lisa, thank you for being on the Dying to Know More podcast. I'm happy to have you here.
Oh, I'm excited to talk to you today, Ashley.
So basically, there's two kind of sides to what I want to discuss, one being hospice, but also the death deck, because there's obviously overlap. So I'm just going to dive in and see where we go. I want to start with your dad, who actually is kind of a low-key social media celebrity. With I loved your death discussion series with him. He's such a sweetheart. So he was diagnosed with leukemia right after you started college. What do you recall about that? Like, what was that time like for you?
Well, first of all, I can't wait to tell my dad that he's a celebrity. So I'm excited about that. We are actually going to give a talk together with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the fall.
Nice.
And so I'm looking forward to that. The series I did is available on YouTube that people can check out. We'll be sure to include that in the show notes, but it was such a precious time to really have those conversations that we hadn't had before. And so we did, through our conversation, we did kind of go back in time to what he remembered and what I remembered about when he was diagnosed.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be really healing because I've been carrying around a lot of guilt for how I responded to his illness, because I think it's because I've worked in the space of illness and death and dying for so long that I think of young Lisa and I'm like, oh man, you could have done better, you know? Now, again, when I'm like gracious with myself, I realize that I was, 19-year-old kid and I coped the best way I could, which is what my dad said,
Yeah.
But I was really terrified of him being sick. He was diagnosed with hairy cell leukemia when he was in his early 40s, and it's a disease that's most commonly found in older men in their 70s. And so it took a really long time to get diagnosed. And his first symptom was actually depression, which it turns out is common with that illness. But it was so bizarre to see my dad having these mental health struggles and them not really knowing what was wrong with him, and just such a sudden change. And so then when they finally diagnosed the hairy cell leukemia, he wasn't really acting himself, and he was really sick
Yeah.
then. And so he was in the hospital receiving treatment. And I remember he was in the hospital for several weeks, and I had a cold, and I was like, "Oh, Dad, I don't want to get you sick," um, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And as we say in my family, I milked my cold. As farmers, we use a lot of farm
Yeah.
terms.
Yeah.
Yeah. But,
Yeah.
I was really, I was trying to avoid the situation. I did eventually visit him, and what he remembers of that time is me coming to the hospital, bringing a mini basketball hoop, and him and I playing basketball in his room as he was, doing better.
Yeah.
And so he has this joyous memory of me and me prioritizing spending time with him. Whereas I have this version of just remembering how much I avoided and didn't want to be there, and
Right.
how, and the guilt that I've kind of carried. And I think that some of that guilt, or not guilt, part of my desire to do better led me to hospice care.
That's what I was going to ask. Obviously, it seems like a natural, like having gone through that, that may have naturally been. But you also likely have to, I would assume, have to have some kind of natural inclinations or strengths to be able to provide that sort of care to other people, right? I mean, so that it must have been within you as well.
Yeah, when I first began hospice, within 2 weeks, I was like, "Okay, this is where I belong."
Is that right?
Yeah, I had worked in trauma and community mental health and survivors of torture and asylum seekers, and I had done quite a bit of other things first,
Yeah,
in my career, but, when I came into hospice, it was like, "Ah, this feels comfortable. This feels like" one of the benefits of hospice is you're really walking alongside people,
yeah,
which is similar as doulas. My role as a hospice social worker is so similar to the role of a doula, and
mhm,
so you know, I'm not fixing them, and
right,
so many aspects of social work are, "Here's my kid, fix him."
mhm,
I'm struggling with anxiety, fix me, help me, and with hospice, there is most often the understanding that, we're not going to fix them and we're going to accompany them and help
mhm,
ensure that their days are as good as they can be and they live as long as they can, um, with a quality of life, and so I get to provide a lot of education on the dying process, support to the patient, a lot of support to family members. I would say that I spend more time supporting family members than patients because often patients are too sick,
yeah,
to engage in meaningful conversations, but the family around them is, struggling with caregiving, struggling with, needing forms completed for family leave and a lot of anticipatory grief.
yeah.
That I would say that's my number one, role is providing that anticipatory grief support.
What does that look like? How do you like, what sort of support? Like, what are the like, the actual tools you provide?
So, education on what they're feeling is normal is
Yeah,
the number one thing that people tend to find helpful,
yeah, mhm,
what I hear so often from families is, "It's excruciating watching him decline like this,"
I know, yeah,
and then they'll start to tell me things like, um, you know, "I don't want him to die, but I can't watch him suffer anymore,"
right,
you know? And people have so much guilt about those feelings, so I normalize,
yeah,
the range of feelings that are associated with anticipatory grief, and I just hold space a lot. I work for a hospice provider that has low productivity requirements and allows us, the social workers, chaplains, to spend a lot of time at the bedside, and so
right,
I tend to, give the wife of a patient an hour or 2 to really talk about anticipatory grief. I'll meet up with people outside of the home, um, if they prefer, so they can talk away from their
yeah,
person, and really give them space to process on their own, or we'll do phone calls where they can kinda slip away, um, but I also use silence and humor a lot. Those are my, go-to tools, and people are surprised to use humor so much in hospice care.
what does that look like? What does humor in hospice care look like?
Mostly it's coming in. Like, it's retaining my sense of humor,
Okay,
if you watch any videos with my dad, you saw that
yeah,
he raised me with a sense of humor. His goal
yeah,
in life is to make my mom laugh before she has breakfast. So, and sometimes it's a ugh, eye roll laugh, but you kinda
a laugh
chuckle.
is a laugh, man.
So, I hold on to that sense of humor, and I first of course, I'm always reading the room because there isn't always opportunity for humor, but a
Right,
lot of times there are, and family members actually want a release, and so I will first look for if the family uses humor. If they are cracking a joke here or there, which often is the case,
yeah,
um, I will lean into that and laugh and let
okay,
them know, like, "Yeah, I mean, this is ridiculous and horrible, and that was funny,"
yeah,
and it's okay to laugh,
yeah,
and then I'll even try to have a conversation about the use of humor and how it is a release and that, it releases chemicals similar to crying, and so it makes you feel better, and
yeah.
so, um, I also will tell a favorite hospice joke, if I sense that they're open to it, and
Hit me with
so
the favorite hospice joke. I need to hear this. What's a hospice joke winner?
Have you seen the new movie about constipation?
No, I have not.
It hasn't come out yet.
That's
So,
funny.
it's,
That's
like,
funny. Yeah,
silly and everyone can relate to constipation, and
yeah,
so, that will kind of break the ice,
yeah,
and, again, I'm using this with clinical judgment. If someone's
yeah,
actively dying and the family is, needing education on end of life, I'm not cracking jokes,
right,
but, there's a lot of opportunities. Some of it will just be like the son of a hospice patient, and I'm kind of assisting a little bit and providing a little care. Maybe he's finished up changing her briefs, and he said something like, "Oh, mom, I never thought I'd see you this way," and kind of chuckle, and I'll lean into that and like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
you don't expect to be here, but shit's got to get done, or
right.
I'll try to make a poop joke or something, shit happens, or,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and what I find is that it really it really helps make connections, but also, um, the realness of it,
yeah,
because there really is opportunity even in hard times often to find a little bit of levity to just get through that moment,
yeah,
and I see humor as a very healthy coping strategy as long as we're still willing to get to underlying emotions,
yeah,
which I'm sure all of us have had lots of situations where we cried and it turned into laughter, and laughter
yeah,
that turns into tears, right?
right.
And so the humor can kind of lower the defenses and get to emotions, as
How
well.
long are you typically like, on average, I mean, I know every case would be different, but how long are you typically with a family once they're put on hospice?
So it really depends. About 50% of people die within just over 2 weeks
Oh, wow.
of a hospice admission,
Okay,
and that's because they're coming on late.
okay.
And then the other half can live, a couple months, 6 months, a couple years.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, I do have a couple patients that have been on service with us, 2 years, but they continue to decline.
Yeah,
One is approaching end of life now, and so, I mean, the very end of life, and so I think, um, people think that you're discharged after 6 months, and that's not the case. As long as the person is continuing to decline and meet criteria for hospice, then they can still qualify for hospice.
okay.
It's when people improve or, have been on for a very long period of time where we're not really seeing any changes over an extended period of time that sometimes they'll discharge a patient.
So if you're with a family for that long, do you is I mean, I would think that how do you not become, like, super close with them or, attached to them, and, like, is it like therapy in the sense that, like, you shouldn't cross a line because then that, like, do you have to have boundaries? What does that look like? So that not only to protect them, but protect you from the heaviness?
Yeah, yes, I definitely have boundaries. Most of my patients that have been on service for, let's say, over 6 months, I'm usually still meeting with them monthly. Sometimes that's a phone call, sometimes it's in person. Some people really need more support than that for
Mm,
extended periods of time, and
mm,
so I can provide more at that, if needed. But, yeah, I maintain a lot of professional boundaries because I've now been working in hospice 18 years, and
wow.
you can't maintain this work if you don't have boundaries, and
Right.
I really encourage the new nurses who join our team who are kinda doing everything and everything for the patient and family, and you can see they're taking on so much, and it's like people with compassionate hearts are led to this work, and sometimes it's hard to know because people need so much as they're dying or their family members need so much, it is hard to develop those boundaries. But I have learned, that you have to set limits. I don't, answer texts outside of my working hours. I
Okay.
don't answer emails outside of my working hours. There's a 24-hour number that they can call for, hospice support, and so, I will respond during business hours, and
Yeah.
that's the most important thing that I do to maintain my boundaries, because once you start texting people in the
Like
evening,
the
they
status
expect
off.
you.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
expect you to keep doing that, and
Yeah.
then they feel left alone or abandoned if you don't,
Yeah.
and so, I have learned that with time. When I was a younger social worker, I was like, "I need to give them all of me," and now as I'm approaching 50, I'm like, "I need I need to maintain for me and
Yeah.
my family too," you
Yeah.
know?
Totally.
Mhm.
All right. Well, so let's talk about the death deck. So I gather, and I just learned that you are now full owner and CEO of the company. Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
exciting.
Yeah.
You did co-create it with someone named Lori Locicero. Is that
Mhm.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so, and she was at her husband, and you were actually a hospice worker with her family when her husband was dying. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
that's
So
how we
how
met.
tell me how the idea came about for this, and just tell me how it all came about.
Yeah, so, I was the hospice social worker for Joe. Joe was in his early 40s.
Okay.
Um, Lori is his wife, and they had 2 young kids at the time. Um, and, you know, when because he was in his early 40s and, he came onto hospice very late, as most young people do. He had a lot of family members involved, which is really common for young people. Siblings and parents, friends are involved, as well as his wife and kids,
Yeah.
and so there's just a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And Lori and Joe were, very prepared on paper, but they just hadn't had many conversations about what he would want, because he had taken the common mindset of, "I'm gonna beat this," and so he didn't wanna have these conversations,
Yeah.
and, healthcare professionals didn't try to have these conversations with him, and so, when he was dying, there were a lot of questions about what he would want and kind of differing opinions from all the different people involved,
Yeah.
and so it was more chaotic than it would have been had, Lori and everyone had a clearer idea of what he would want in different, regarding decisions about his care and medication use and these important topics. And so years later, Lori reached out to me because she was, writing her memoir, which just was released, and, which is part of how we came to kind of separate, and she's doing her own thing now with her memoir and writing and stuff. So, but at that time, we came together and started talking about, her experience and her experiencing grief and all of the second guessing that comes when you don't really know if you know, did right by your person or made the
Mhm.
choices they would have wanted.
Yeah.
And so we came up with the idea to create a game to help people talk about death and dying. And we
Okay.
started looking at all the tools out there, and there were some great tools. I mean, the Hello game has been around a while, and Go Wish is another great game. But we looked at those and said, okay, well, we want to create something that appeals to a different audience. We want to create something that people who don't want to talk about this topic might be willing to engage with. And
Right.
so that's when we came up with the idea to add multiple choice questions and humor,
Yeah.
to try to make it more approachable, to try to lessen people's defenses about it. And
Yeah.
then, so that's the death deck. I'll
How
hold
many
it
and
up
there's
here.
112 questions, is that right?
112 questions,
And
yes.
what does the research look like? Like, how did you come up with that's a lot of questions.
It is a lot of questions. You know, the research behind it came, I mean, some of it was just my professional experience and
Yeah,
Lori's personal experience
yeah,
on, what's common that people don't know and what do they need to know.
yeah,
And then some of it was just, digging deep into all of these other aspects of death and dying that I hadn't really in my everyday hospice practice been as familiar with. Like
yeah.
the fact that you could send cremated remains to space. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. That's
Early
amazing.
on. So
Yeah.
you can. So, yeah, it was really fun coming up with the questions and then
Can we
editing.
ask a couple? I'd love to hear
Yeah,
what a
let's
few of
do
them are.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Let's go for it. Did you want me to pull one?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
If given a chance to watch how others grieve you at your funeral, would you? A, yes, that would be an amazing experience. B, I'd try it, but if they got too sad or suspiciously happy, I'm out. No, it would be crushing.
I'm already dead though, right?
You're already dead, so would
Hell
you
yeah, I'd
watch
wanna
others at your funeral?
yeah, I absolutely. I
Yeah,
think
that's
so. I mean, I don't know. I mean, of course, if somebody was laughing and happy about it, I'd have to maybe
dancing.
pay a visit from the afterlife or something, I don't know, but, do you have a favorite question?
Oh, I have a lot of favorite questions. One of my favorite questions is signs from beyond the grave are A comforting validation that souls live on. B, probably just a coincidence, I think, maybe. C, not real. Once they're gone, there's no way to phone home.
What's your answer on that?
So my answer used to be C, and
Mhm,
then the more time I spent working with the dying and the grieving, it's turned into A.
okay. Which I think is
Um,
beautiful. I mean, I think to have that kind of I think that's a beautiful comfort, I would think, for people.
yeah, and I think honestly, I'm choosing to believe A.
Mhm,
There is some choice in that. Like,
yeah,
is there still a skepticism in me sometimes that, yeah, these might be coincidences? I think
yeah,
maybe. Sometimes
yeah.
I'm a B, um, but, my mother and father-in-law, show up for my husband and I as bunnies, and I can't even remember how it began, but they just are bunnies, and so we'll, go to the, botanic gardens by our house, and we went recently on, the anniversary of my father-in-law's death, and we were just kinda wandering around and talking, and we were talking about how much we miss him, and then all of a sudden, there's one bunny there, and we're like, "Oh, hi, Gary. There he is."
Aw.
And then pretty soon, the other little bunny comes over,
Oh my gosh.
which is his mom, Kay, and we're like, "Oh, good." Like, they're there together, and now my husband is if you were to ask him that question, which I have asked him that question, he doesn't believe it, but he chooses
Yeah,
to believe it.
yeah,
And so we have those conversations, and he's like, "I mean, deep down, do I really think that those are my parents, like, or that they sent that sign?" Ah, But
we will never know, though. I mean,
but
but
we'll never know, and so I think that for some of us, I think there is kind of a choice involved in it where it's like, it feels so good, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I like to believe that it is.
yeah, I'd agree with that. So, okay,
Mhm.
talk to me about the end of life deck. How is that different from the death deck?
So the end of life deck is the one that I use with my hospice families and
Okay,
patients. So that is 52 questions. And instead of asking a whole range of questions about death and dying, um, it asks more specific questions about end of life preferences. So it's designed to use with people with serious illness. So the questions aren't as wide ranging or flippant or have as much humor in them because, as we get closer to end of life, we need to use more sensitivity.
Yeah.
So that's the deck that I use the most often with my hospice patients, though I do tend to sprinkle in some death deck questions in there, the ones that kind of apply to hospice patients. So I have my own deck that I've made of my favorites of each
Okay.
of each of those. And then I actually have a third deck launching in September
Yeah. What is
that
it?
I'm just starting to talk about, which is the dementia deck.
Oh,
So this is a planning tool to help people talk through specifically what they would want for their care if they were living with dementia.
that is amazing. That
Yeah,
is amazing. Congratulations.
thank you. I'm super excited about it. I collaborated with Compassion and Choices on it. They have
Okay.
this great tool called the Dementia Values and Priorities tool where you can go through all of these questions about what you want for your care. And then it attaches to your advanced directive. And so it can help guide
That's
your
amazing.
family members in the future. So I took some inspiration from some of those questions and then added some of my own to try to help people really have the conversations and then hopefully complete the tool and then have the conversations, whatever way you want to do it.
That
But
is
it's
fantastic.
yeah, I'm
That's
I'm
really
super excited because, dementia is we have a deathbed question that asks, what illness are you most afraid of being diagnosed with? And dementia is almost always the answer that people give. And so I know that there's a lot of fear and worry, and people have witnessed family members live with dementia for a really long time, and they have feelings about specific, moments of time and decisions that
yeah.
have been made for them. I think one of the biggest being, putting in a feeding tube or not, and the
Mm.
implications of that, with advanced dementia. So the goal is to help people really reduce their fear by spelling out more clearly what they would want in different situations.
I think that's kind of at the heart of everything is like and even about dying in general is just like because it feels so out of your control, anytime you can put some control or get some control or feel like you've got a voice or a say or something, then it kind of eases and kind of disempowers the unknown. So I think it's brilliant. That is brilliant. I'm so where is the end of life deck? Is that available for consumers as well, or is that just for hospice folks?
Yeah, that's available for everyone.
So they're all three going to be available on your
The death deck.
website,
Mhm.
thedeathdeck.com. Okay,
Yes.
right on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I have 3 more questions that are just kinda general ones that I ask everybody, kinda
Okay.
rapid fire. What has your work taught you about living?
Mm. To get out there and live. Yeah. Um, I'm grateful to work in a industry that reminds me of my mortality. And my health. I I live with chronic illness and so health is top of mind for me. But when I'm feeling good, I am grateful in a way that I don't think I would be if I didn't work around so much illness and end of life. Um, and then the mortality awareness, just being super aware that I have no idea how long I'm gonna live, and that I wanna soak in these fun, lively, delicious moments with people I care about and prioritize relationships above everything else.
That's awesome. Are you
Mhm.
afraid to die, and why or why not?
No, I'm
No?
not afraid to die. I think watching so many people die over the years, I know well, in lots of situations, I know what to expect. Obviously, it could be something else. Um, but the body knows what to do as it's dying, and I've witnessed that a lot, and I know that there are, medications to ease my way, and I know I've given very specific direction to people about the use of medications and all these other important things, so I feel pretty confident in that piece. I'm approaching 50 and I wanna live quite a bit longer than that, but I also feel like it's been an amazing life, and so, I think my fear one of our questions is, "What's your biggest fear about dying?" And one of the answers is it happening too soon, and I'm
Mm,
starting to feel that a little bit because I have so much that I wanna do still, so I think that's the only, aspect of it is just, like, I want at least, like, 30 more good years,
yeah.
but I'm not afraid of the dying process.
Okay. I turned 50 last year and it's like there's something in my brain has switched. So suddenly I'm like every like ache and pain. I'm like, oh my God, I'm dying. Oh my God, I'm dying. I gotta get, and you do like there is a sort of which whatever, that's just my anxiety or whatever. But it does like there is some sort of like, okay, I'm over the halfway point, clearly. You know what I mean? I better get cracking on my to-do list, which brings me to my final question. What is the single most important thing that you want to do or experience or accomplish before you die?
Single most. Oh. Oh, I can't come up with one, there's so many. I think mostly I wanna see my 16-year-old son living his adult life happy.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I wanna see. He's currently an angsty teenager that's dealing with,
Yep.
life, and, teenage years are not easy,
No.
and so I wanna see him turn into this adult and see what his life brings that's and maintain that relationship
Yeah.
with him. That's my biggest priority.
That's awesome. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. It's been my pleasure. For anybody who is interested in purchasing the death deck or the end of life deck or the forthcoming, what's the Alzheimer's deck called? Is it called the Alzheimer's deck?
The dementia deck.
Dementia deck.
Mhm.
Go to thedeathdeck.com. You're also on Instagram, the death deck, TikTok, Facebook, anywhere else. Y'all,
YouTube.
you're busy, by the way. Your social media feeds, like, I don't know how are you doing all of that or do you have somebody doing it for you?
I'm doing it.
Oh my God. Like there's not enough hours in the day. I don't know where you like plus working full time, plus momming, plus being
Oh,
a
I work part-time.
you
That's
what?
how. I work
Oh,
part-time.
okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot,
But,
but you do a great job.
the 5 AM is when I am jumping on that social media, so that's how it gets done.
That's
Early riser.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. All right. Well,
Oh, I
thank you
loved our
so much for your time.
Yeah, I loved our conversation, Ashley.